everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. And today we have a very special guest, and that's honestly an understatement. Anneke Lucas is a survivor of something most of us can't even begin to imagine. As a young child, she was sold by her own mother into a global network of child sex trafficking, where she was abused by some of the most powerful elites in the world. But Anneke didn't just survive, she transformed. After decades of deep healing through therapy, writing, yoga, and spiritual work, she became an international speaker, author, and the creator of the unconditional model, a trauma healing method now used by practitioners around the world. She's worked with survivors inside and outside of prison, guided others through unimaginable pain, and dedicated her life to exposing the truth. In a world slowly waking up to the horrors of trafficking, ritual abuse, and elite corruption, Anneke stands as a living testimony, not just to what's wrong with the world, but to what's possible when we choose healing over silence. Anneke, thank you so much for being here. It's an honor to have you with us. I'm already emotional about it.
Well, no wonder. No wonder what you said. It's a very beautiful introduction, and you kind of got to the core of the problem right there and the issue and the possibilities. So thank you.
I'm gonna jump right into it. Like I told you earlier, I'm not gonna go through what you already spoke about in previous interviews. I have so many questions to ask you, really. You were sold by your family, your own mother, into a trafficking network at the age of 6. What is something that the world still doesn't understand about what happens to children inside those elite circles?
I came from a family where my mother was extremely mentally ill, and this is why I think we were targeted. Otherwise, the general profile of the families where children would be taken, in my home country in Belgium, were more poor families, poor incestuous families, you could say. So where the parents really wanted the money and it would just be quiet. From those families, you don't know if your child's going to come back too. So the family has to be extremely dysfunctional and chaotic for that to be, a possibility. And of course, most parents can't imagine that with their own children. But then incest is sort of the first unimaginable thing that happens in families where, we know that even though it is really hard to imagine that a parent would rape their child, that nonetheless is such a common problem. And then the boundaries of such families is you just don't know how far exploitation will go. And so indeed, when I was young, there were pimps working for the network that would infiltrate these kinds of families to then bring the children around to the events of the network. So during the week, we children would go to school and be living with my family, and the other children would live with their family if we survived it, and then um, in the weekends or whatever, whenever they needed us, we would be used in the network. So originally there was a woman that came to work for us as a cleaning lady, and then she and her husband were the pimps for the network. So originally I was taken by the pimps that were, through her work would infiltrate in families, and then she would offer to babysit, and then this is how it started. And this was after a year of grooming, that they would take me away to outings, and there would be other children there. I'm from Belgium, so and we were Flemish. So there were Flemish children or Dutch children from Holland. The couple of pimps were from Holland. So they said they were nieces and nephews, and it kind of didn't make sense. Of course, as a 5-year-old, you don't think about those things. But they originally brought me into the network. And then what was really unusual about my situation is that my mother became actively involved herself after I actually tried to tell her. She then took the reins and got a car because she didn't have her own car. And I'm from 1963, so we're talking 1969. There was not a time in provincial Belgium where most families didn't have two cars. You know, it wasn't like that. Most wives stayed at home. She was a stay-at-home mom, and she got a car basically just to drive me to events. I mean, she used it all the time, of course, but she got it when this shift happened, when she got involved. And then she would drive me to events. And then only at the very end did I actually find out from perpetrators that she was getting paid. And but again, she was picked because of her mental health, not because of our social status. So we were, yes, an incestuous family. She was an incest perpetrator. My stepfather was extremely absent, but we were not poor. And so it was different from the other children. So we have these children that would come from the outside, where in the network there was a differentiation made between the white children that came from the Belgian or Dutch families, and definitely the children from the immigrant worker families that were brown-skinned. And those children, their lives, they lost their lives more easily, for sure. Those children of color were used more for extreme things, although I was too. You know, it wasn't a guarantee that I would live, but I was more used for sex and less for the extreme stuff. And then there were also the children of the people that were themselves part of this network. So this is an indoctrination that happens from birth, that these people have lived that way themselves in this, you know, call it satanic, I don't know, but they brought their own children to be abused. In the higher circles, certainly those children are abused and also trained, like I was in mind control training. So for the first 3 years, I was just used in Belgium as a, like you could say, a throwaway child, you know, that there's no guarantee you're going to live. And so the children would come from where I talked to you about, but then the network itself is local. You know, it was the Belgian elite. It was definitely the elite there. The person in charge there was the Minister of National Defense at the time. He was prime minister twice.
Oh.
And then he really was working for the royals who were in charge, who were truly in charge, sort of behind the scenes. It was royals that were in charge of the whole affair. What the Minister of National Defense did, who called himself the boss, I called him the boss. What he did was really take care of all the blackmail situation. So people that wanted to enter this elite club that were really wanting to get power in the world and really wanting to climb, they came through secret clubs or secret societies. He himself was kind of a proud member even of the Freemasons. And then through that, people were, you know, titrated into the more increasingly dark things that happen, you know, so there would be parties and there would be orgies. Then, you know, there would be orgies until a certain time. And then in the later hours, they would bring in the children, which is, you know, what I often had to wait in an antechamber with a pimp until the later hours, until they were ready to bring the children out. So then there would be an orgy, and then they'd bring the children out later when those people that were not ready, or that were just not open to seeing children, they would be gone. So people would be faced with increasingly incriminating materials, you know, and they would be filmed secretly to eventually become completely blackmailed. But even as they were getting blackmailed, the farther they would go in the crimes that they were invited to participate in, the more they would be rewarded with position and power. And of course, that meant then more money, etc.
Wow. What you're describing is what a lot of people know today is what happened with people like Jeffrey Epstein, for example, and P. Diddy, which Oh, well, I have another question about it later, but I would you like, do you remember if there was any type of specific, I guess, secret society involved? Like you said, Freemasons. Are there were they only Freemasons involved, or were there other people from other different groups?
Oh,
Like,
different groups. I know that there were several of the aristocrats were involved with Agnus Dei. So that's like from the religious side, the religious Catholic side, that was the group. Again, there's a lot of members of Dei, or there's also a lot of members of the Freemasons that would have no idea what happens at the top levels. But really, at the top levels, they would be involved in extremely dark things. And then the rest of the membership kind of protects the image of the society. So I know for sure there were other societies involved. Yeah.
wow. And but I'm just going back to what you said earlier. Correct me if I'm wrong. You said that during the week you would just go about your regular, I guess, regular quote unquote daily life. You would go to school, and then on the weekend you would be taken to those parties.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So yes, I did go to school, and I wasn't a very good student. I was very shy. I was very, yeah, distracted. They said distracted, but obviously I was completely dissociated is what it was. I was completely not even present because I was so traumatized.
Mhm. Wow. Yeah, because you're describing a very similar thing with some very similar, I guess, routine or something that other people that have been going through the same thing also in Israel. I heard a testimony of a lady called Yael Shitrit that said the same thing, that she would, have her normal life, go to school and everything, and then on the weekend her caregiver or her nanny would take her to those parties.
Yeah,
That's
and that was very much present also for the children of the aristocrats, or I say aristocrats, or the children of those people in the network that were born into it. Those children born into it, they were very concerned with presenting a front that was perfect. In fact, those children would usually always have the best results in school. They would be the best students because those parents, even though the children are tortured and sexually abused, they're also made to feel that they're special and they have to perform. So they have to perform in the world because for those people, the image is everything. And so they present a perfect front. With me being from a less important family, not important at all. And in fact, in the first years, it was not important at all. So I didn't do so well in school because my parents didn't care. So I didn't get pushed to have this perfect front so much as those children that were born into the network. But yeah, they would not only have to go to school, they would have to do super well. They would be involved in a lot of extracurricular activities as well and have to um, be the best in everything that they did. And then me personally, I was often held back from school when there was an event during a school day. If my mother had to take me to a man's home or something in the daytime, then I would just be kept out of school. Um, one summer, I was trafficked the entire summer, so I was gone for 2 months, and that was never even home. But if there was a school, if I missed a lot of time in school, and then my mother had a very good relationship with the local doctor, that I personally don't know if he was part of it or not, but he always just wrote the notes for school. He came, he diagnosed, that she would wait, weeks sometimes. Then he would come, he would say, "You have a flu." He would write a note. He would talk to her more than he would look at me.
Yeah, that really makes you think if how many people were really involved in this. In your opinion, or from your point of view, were there any specific rituals or any belief systems that were used to justify this type of abuse? Were the people involved in you say a cult, or like what was it? Was it a satanic reason behind it, or was it to people speak about adrenochrome? Is there anything like that has to do with that? Like what was really the reason behind it?
Well, I never heard that word, but in the first years, so in the first years when I was in Belgium, I didn't see anything of that. But what I did see and witness and survive was that there were certain aristocrats that were, it felt like this had been going on forever, maybe thousands of years, or, these families are as old as from, the Middle Ages, the year 1000, whatever, in the beginning of the Knights, when these families were being formed.
Yeah.
And you could feel that this is a very old evil that just, for them, the blood is really important. And you could feel that the evil is this sort of part and parcel of their mindset. And, you know, and that's of course never everybody. There's a lot of people that are very good-hearted in that sphere as well, in the aristocracy. But those who have these inclinations, or those who are very badly abused and don't really, and are weak, I would say, they have that platform there to commit evil as much as they want, do whatever they want, supposedly, and just, never have to face consequences. That was the idea, that it's all hidden and it's all built on not never having to face consequences. And then, but then so the Belgians are sort of part of a greater network. Even though it was local, mostly in the beginning in Belgium, at age 9, I was then given to what I would say is a global networker. And so that was American, but he had connections with people all over the world. And so there's the global network. When I basically ended up completely by accident being picked out to become an elite sex slave by, that one man. But that one man, so he definitely believed in the Satanist satanic philosophy, which is a philosophy of inversion. I think, if you look at Aleister Crowley and that belief system that goes to do as thou wilt, and do as thou wilt, then becomes horrors, becoming basically organized serial killers is what I would say. That's what they are.
Wow.
Hidden behind the veil, the mantle of power, is an organized serial killers. It is part of a belief system where what I saw. So I know what they believe. They try to make me one of them. I was then sort of, they felt that, he thought that I was chosen, and I was really lucky because I was now going to be part of their club. So I was 9 years old, and then I was being trained. I was trained in mind control training, is all part of it. And yes, involved in rituals as well. And these satanic rituals, that the ones that I was at and observed, and, unfortunately, yes, there is definitely a very strong belief system. But what I always noticed is that these are people that were extremely traumatized in their childhood. And these are the weak children that gave in to their perpetrators, and then, in one way, always made the perpetrators good, so that whatever their parents or their abusers were doing, that is then right and good. And so they had to keep proving that for the rest of their life. So that this philosophy feels to me like it is actually a philosophy that is built on an extremely immature psychological development stage. So do as thou wilt, that would be, why would that not be wonderful things and doing good things? Instead, do as thou wilt means you feel completely dead inside because, and again, this is my perspective on this.
Mhm.
But I think those people felt completely dead inside because of the trauma that they suffered in their own childhood, and that every time that little child that they once were lost hope, there's a little death that occurs inside of them. And as that happens, that hope is gone, that death inside has occurred. Now there's a dead part, you could say, in that person. How are they going to feel alive if they give up so many times? It's like they've given up on life, and they've given up on hope, and they've given up on, really, the little child has given up hope that they can be understood, that they can be loved properly. And all of them have that essential perversion that happens with sexual abuse, that you lose your innocence. You think, okay, now I'm not innocent anymore. This before and after, before I was innocent, I was free, I was happy. Then I'm sexually abused. It's all gone. It's devastating. It's like you feel like you might as well die, because now there's no point in living anymore. And in fact, a lot of those people don't see a point in living. They feel that there is no meaning to life, and everything they're doing is some unconscious repetition, because that deadness of that child that is abused and that now feels that the only way they can receive love is through putting out sexually. So now the essential perversion has occurred. Like, first, I am lovable as I am without doing anything for it. Then I'm sexually abused, and now I'm only lovable if I put out sexually. So now sex is linked to love, and there's nothing else. There's no divine love anymore. There's no joy of being anymore. There's depression that's going to set in, because the depression means that these parts are just not being understood and loved and seen for for their innocent selves. And with sexual abuse, it's not just that your innocence is stolen, it's that the body response could never be understood by the child. In sex abuse, the body goes into freeze mode, and in the freeze mode, you have hormones that are being released in your system, painkillers, basically, natural painkillers. The fear puts you in a state of heightened pleasure, because you've got painkillers running through your blood, through your system, in the fear, in that state of freeze. And your blood flows more slowly. You don't feel pain as much. You are more receptive to pleasure because of the painkillers, the natural painkillers, the hormones that are running through your body.
Wow.
Yeah, so you're very likely, if you're being molested, you never know. It could be extremely sadistic, and you don't know. There could be no pleasure at all. But with sexual abuse, in many cases, with smaller children, pleasure can be felt, a lot of pleasure can be felt. And then for a child, they could never say, after they feel pleasure, that confusion, that occurs in a child that's being sexually abused. Well, they could never say, I didn't want it. And so that child starts to believe that they did want that, and that this is good and this is right. And that's all I ever saw in these perpetrators. That's all I ever saw, was these little boys that were just trying to make right the things that were done to them, and they were repeating them to prove their perpetrators right. And the whole belief system of Satanism is that. And when they perpetrate, they receive that light and innocence. It's like the energy of that child, that innocence of that child. For a moment, it's like the part is dead, but these other parts that come to life in the sadism, it's like starting to feel alive again. Like, that's how you have to feel alive, is to see another suffer the same death that you have suffered inside. And then you're like, it's not me. It's not me that's feeling that. That's sadism. Like you're happy that it's not you, that it's very young, emotional, developmental state, sadism. So, and but with murders, it's the same. I didn't know the word adrenochrome. I know that they were doing horrible things, but what they were doing is taking the energy, whether that's physical or whether it's energetic. Mostly, I felt that they were taking the energy of that young child to make themselves feel alive in that moment, and they would feel tremendously alive. They would all be together, you know, in a ritual like that. They would all be extremely high, and you could say they were ecstatic. And so normally evil is lonely, you know. Normally an evil person is very lonely, but these people are doing this together, and so the togetherness in what should be a really lonely place creates this kind of common ecstasy, also of course fueled with drugs and everything else, you know. That's not just, it's not natural, but they are ecstatic, and that is sort of the bliss that we seek, you know, through connection with the divine. That is the most powerful replica, is that ecstasy that they experience during these rituals.
It's hard to even fathom this situation, this scenario. I'm listening to you and I'm just uh, mind blown is an understatement. It's horrified, like so many feelings. Sorry, I need a minute. First of all, these people to me, they don't sound like human at all. They talk about, you know, like there's a
They're not
lot of
like us. Yeah.
conspiracy theories about it. Yeah, but I
Well, they're
can
not like us. Those people are not like us. So what I saw was that these people, if you were to see these people at the emotional age that they are, instead of their physical age, you would see all these little babies and toddlers, you know, fighting and trying to get theirs, because that's kind of it. They're all emotionally so young. It's often their intellect is just one way to make up for the emotional depravity and emotional insensitivity. They can be very sensitive to, you know, even psychic and everything. That's not what I'm talking about. It's the emotional development, like the development that only has to do with receiving love, accepting love, which is what the healing is about. That these little parts need to be seen and understood and heard and loved for who they really are, for the innocence, and they have to be made to understand that this was not their fault. They have to also feel the feelings of betrayal of these people that, you know, should have protected them and cared for them and instead abused them. That's the healing, really. That's all it is. It's just receiving love and understanding for all the different parts that are, you know, a part is sort of like, you can say, the moment of the trauma. You get stuck in your emotional development because there's a trauma, there's a freeze, and there's a life threat. And it's not like you heal from that if you can't, you know, you have to work through it to heal from it. So yeah, the healing process is to feel everything. But first, you need somebody there with you who witnesses and who's holding that space for you without judgment. And none of these people have had that. And but mostly, there's also, as human beings, we have free will. And so to a certain degree, there is will present, you know, of, and then I say it's also not being able to make the right choice, because obviously nobody really wants the effects on their own being of that kind of evil.
yeah. Sorry. I'm wiping up my tears here. It's you're so amazing. I can't believe you're sitting in front of me and talking about it like that. And I'm very curious to know. Sorry, as I wipe my tear here. One second. Sorry, I apologize. Um, I'm very
Actually, really beautiful that you can cry. I'm just, thank you.
um, no, yeah, it's absolutely amazing. I didn't think I would cry so much, but I apologize.
It's very sad.
um, I I want to jump into a little bit about your healing process because you speak about it so bravely, and I think it's very important for people, also people that went through it, but even other people that went through trauma. There's many people that go through trauma on a daily basis for many reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially now.
How did you get to where you are today? Like, did this experience follow you throughout your whole life? Did you have a point where you kind of like forgot about it, like you put it in the back of your head and you,
Oh, I forgot about it, but it was still following me. I mean, it was affecting every moment of my life. I
wow.
just didn't know why these things were happening to me.
Mhm.
No, it's not as if you have to, I mean, in the trauma, dissociation is a natural occurrence because you can't hold on to that degree of fear and then also still live, and especially live with that person often. So dissociation is natural in any trauma, when your life is at stake. But then in mind control, it gets weaponized on top of that. So there's more things to make sure that you're dissociated, that you get electrocuted also to separate the brain halves, and to keep, sometimes after weekends or events or something, get electrocuted to make sure that you don't remember. Or there's also a lot of programming to make sure that you don't remember, which is sort of trauma is inflicted, and then very strong repetition, repeated messages to make sure that you don't remember. Or a message is, if you remember, if you start remembering this, it's because you're crazy, then you're going to say you're crazy. Or if you start remembering this, then you're going to kill yourself, and you have to look for a way to kill yourself if you remember it. So there's a whole lot of programming. I mean, it's hard to believe that, but there's so much because it's so crazy. But there's a whole lot of programming around not remembering, not being allowed to remember. So when I first got flashbacks in the 80s, so I'm 62, so this is my whole life already. And then again, I got out. I mean, I was rescued at age 11, so that's very unusual. So I've been out for 51 years. No, they did track me. That they were. I didn't realize this when I was a young adult, and when I didn't quite remember it, I was still. I found out later that there were people in my vicinity that were actually from network families, and so in fact they were they were kind of keeping track. I didn't know, and I was getting flashbacks. I didn't. I followed with suicide programming. So I didn't want to believe it. Of course, you also just naturally don't want to believe it. There's a program called fog programming that is meant to keep you in a fog, that when you start to remember something, you're like, I don't know if this can be real. And you just sort of like feel this confusion settling over you, and you could never get out. You feel like you could never get out and never actually ground and say this happened. So that's its particular program, gray programming or fog program, to keep you from actually remembering any of it. So all of that was happening. And meanwhile, I wasn't really finding a therapist that could really hold it. So while I was being overwhelmed, I was getting the flashbacks, the extreme things, and couldn't place it, didn't have a context for it. My mother and my family, they have a narrative of what my life was like. And even though none of it made sense, I was with that narrative. I believed that narrative. Though I couldn't place it. I didn't have any reference to it either. I personally had never heard of this, even though this was in the 80s and there were actually a lot of survivors speaking out, but I just never reached me at that time. But then I started going to, this is the early 80s. Then I went to, when I went mid 80s, mid to late 80s. Then I went to, started going, I first got in touch with sexual abuse in therapy. My therapist was open to that. And then I was going to groups, you know, survivor support groups. And then there were people there sharing about ritual abuse. And so when they did, I was feeling something very deep, but I couldn't get there, even as I was having flashbacks. I couldn't bring it to my therapist, so I didn't have a safe place. There was no safe place to bring it. So that was till 97, I found a therapist that I finally felt I could, and then it immediately opened up, like in a really big way. And that was extremely difficult because once it opened up, once someone was open, and again, she was a doctor, she did not know that this existed, but she
Wow.
was open. That was the only difference. The
Yeah.
others were just closed. They just didn't want to believe it.
They didn't want to believe you.
No.
Wow.
No, they did. It's not that they didn't want to believe me, they didn't believe that it existed.
Wow.
So with my main therapist before, I didn't even feel I could bring it to her because there would have been no openness for it. I didn't even try with her. With others, I did try, and they didn't believe. And then some they didn't believe me. They did not believe me. But so in '97, I looked really hard when I came back to New York from Los Angeles, but I had to look hard and long for a therapist that I felt I could trust. There's a lot of people, I was looking for a therapist and I thought, wow, the more expert they were working with survivors of sexual abuse, the more damaging they were, I felt. So my therapist was open, and then everything started to open up, and then often it was really, really, really hard because when you start to remember all of that and you know that it actually happened, and there was also context then from the Dutroux case in Belgium, which is sort of the Epstein case or the Diddy case from Belgium. That was Dutroux was a pimp for the network, and he was caught. They found 4 bodies of children,
Wow. Bodies.
bodies.
Wow.
Yeah, it
And
was, yeah,
I believe that today you're such a beacon of light to an inspiration to so many people. You probably have a lot of people that go through the same experience contacting you also, right?
absolutely.
How common is it, would you say? Because I'm an outsider. I only heard about it honestly by reading a book. Somehow this book found me and I started reading, and that's how I learned about it. And the more I learned, the more creepier it got to learn the numbers,
Super
and
creepy.
children are going missing every year. How common is it? How serious is this problem?
It's super creepy, and it's super prevalent because this network, I call it a network.
Mhm.
So it's like a mafia, but they use children, and then they have the satanic belief system added onto it. But the satanic belief system is almost a choice. The Belgians didn't believe. I mean, the royalty probably, some of the nobility probably had that belief system. I was not privy to that. I didn't really witness that myself. I just witnessed some very sadistic people. But that politician that was running the network, he didn't believe it. He just did it for show. He was doing all the same things, just to be clear, but it was all in this context for him of practical blackmail. And then when the global networkers came, he wanted to do business with them, so he set up a ritual, even though he himself didn't believe it. But they would wear the capes as well, and for when they were doing it for a special guest, they would do all the same things. And in and of their own group, they would kill children as well, just to be clear. That they were not sacrificed, but they were eliminated because either given to a sadist or a group of sadists, or when they got afraid that children would talk. But it's very prevalent because it's not just the elites, it's supported. Like the pimps that were working, that got me in, she was a cleaning lady and he had a hard time keeping a job. He was a raging pedophile. And so you have these people on the lower levels. They don't get paid huge sums of money to do what they do, but maybe in his case, he got protected from being persecuted as a pedophile because he raped a lot of children. So it's kind of whatever people want and need, people that are connecting into this crime organization that is run by the elites. It's on whatever level, but so it's very well supported. And there's a lot of people, I've spoken to hundreds of people that have survived this, and also people that are still in it. Because,
Wow.
yeah, because see, inside the network, depending on the level, you do have to give your will. So some people are coerced, and other people are there of their free will. I don't usually get to see the ones that are there of their free will, except unless they're trying to infiltrate or something, unless they're spying on me or something. But it's extremely prevalent. And then what you have on the higher levels, you have the billionaires that are involved. Well, they will have NGOs that'll often do exactly the opposite of what they're presenting as. So the NGOs are another tax, write-off, and they're all about money and keeping the control through the money.
Yeah.
So I saw Evelyn, the Rothschild, who clearly had the highest position of anyone that I ever met inside the network. And I saw him, he was not a pedophile, and I only saw him because he had to give his permission to the billionaire that was trafficking me to turn me into the sex slave that, he had to give his permission, which I believe was because he was going to get a cut. So if you have an elite sex slave child that is trained just to make the most, to go after the most powerful men in the world, then for that, they were going to give me a platform so I would be famous, so that these powerful men would find me. So as a child, that's millions of dollars. They'd be basically sold in prostitution, or it's slavery because it's prostitution. But if you're a good slave, you get paid really well as well. And even sometimes they were, so I was told that I would always have $2 million in the bank.
Wow.
Now, I don't think that would have been my money, but the network gives you the money so that you appear super rich, and I was going to be famous anyway, but so you can do anything, because you can show that you have $2 million in your bank account. At the time, that was a lot of money, in the early 70s. But I was told that at 9 years old, Evelyn the Rothschild was the first one who was really explaining what my life was going to be like. And he also made me give me my will at age 9 to want to be part of that family, which he called it, he called it the family. And he gave an extremely detailed description of all the things that I would have in my life, all the physical comforts that I would have in my life. And so I would be an asset, and then they would be making money on it. But let's say that the same billionaire, he would start an organization to fight sex trafficking, say,
Mhm.
and to save children. So that would be the front, because they're all about, the billionaire too. He was all about fantastic image. So he would have like this big NGO that would be to save the children from trafficking. And then instead, they would actually use that as a front to traffic the children, you see.
Wow. No way. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can believe it actually.
So there's a lot of that. And so I worked with several survivors of Epstein as well. And so I know that he was going to Kosovo during the war there to get the orphans. And one survivor that I know, she looks Eastern European,
Mhm.
and she was with him from when she was a baby. And he brought her to the United States, placed her in a satanic family where he had constant access to her. I just want to mention that because there's these rumors around now that Epstein, there's all this stuff going on about Epstein, and there's this idea floating around that he was only interested in older teens, which is completely ridiculous to say that. Nobody would know that unless you you speak to survivors and you allow survivors to speak.
Mhm.
That that young woman was his slave from when she was a little baby.
How old? Do you know?
Doesn't really know, but she, from her papers, she would have been 2. And she
Oh.
doesn't remember, but you know, he did go there in those times. He did go to the orphanages in Kosovo. Um, who's mentioned that? Whitney Webb has mentioned that he would go to Kosovo, and she clearly is Eastern European. She has the just unmistakable look of an Eastern European, but she was also sexually, so she was a sex slave from always. And Epstein basically didn't, he did not have an age of the children. It was all children. It was all children of all ages, and it included, and in the network, babies are sexually abused. Just want to make that clear. That those people, once you have no more morals, it's not like there's a difference. Once your morals are gone, every choice you make towards accepting the material comforts against truth and integrity, you go deeper into a hole where in the end you just don't know. Your voice of conscience just disappears. And as I said, because of their own psychological conditions, they don't even know, a lot of them, they don't know, like it's like life has no meaning. Nothing has any meaning. That's the torture of that soul, is that nothing has any meaning anymore if you can't connect from the heart to anything. And those people are very different from us. That's what we don't understand. That somebody can have a really great front, like the billionaire, fantastic front, but nothing meant anything to him. He only came to life when he was like when he was with me with little girls, because he was a pedophile and he liked, training little girls, and he liked to be with little girls. He felt loved in that moment, and he felt like he was also protecting his perpetrator, probably because it was all good and it was all right and he was not doing anything wrong. He was proving that to himself all the time. And he was a what I call sincere Satanist. He really believed. And of course, all of them feel extremely superior to all of us. I mean, they pretend to be humble, but really they feel, because of their blood, that they are better. And so humanity is sort of, for them, has become a resource where they just do the same thing to all of humanity, sucking our life energy and our money and our blood. I mean, it's blood, sweat, and tears, for their own dark purposes, just compromising so many people in political positions that are part of it, but more like puppets,
It makes total sense. Sorry for
Yeah.
cutting you here.
No, no, no.
Because when you see these people in power and these people are they're you describe people that are in power, that have a lot of money, that have a lot of connections, politicians, elites, so-called elites, royalty, royal family members. And when you look at what is happening now to our world and where our world is going and how people are being treated all over the world, and in all the countries all over the world, we're going through very rough times. And it makes total sense because you see what their agenda is. So there's a big connection between your story and what you're saying and our reality.
And I've seen people in the network context when I was a child that are now involved in this globalization.
In globalization, you mean like
The World Economic Forum.
World Economic Forum? Yeah, I wanted to ask you about it. Interesting. Yeah, I'm not surprised
One person, anyway, one person.
that you have been with, you've seen, or
No, I saw. Not everybody I had personal interactions with, but this one I just saw him. I saw him there, and I've also heard other survivors that were trained by him. And he had an important role. I mean, he started the World Economic Forum in 1971. It was the year before I saw him. He had just started it.
wow, okay. Wow. I wanted to ask you about because you mentioned also Rothschild earlier, and you said he wasn't a pedophile, but he was paying somebody for
He
what?
wasn't paying anybody, he was receiving money.
Paying money, sorry.
I think so. He was the boss. He was definitely, I was mostly trafficked in the elite circles by David Rockefeller, who had to go and ask permission from the much younger, by the way, Evelyn de Rothschild, they were discussing in front of me, what he wanted to do with me. And he didn't realize that I understood English already. And Rothschild noticed that. So this is in the home of Rothschild. We sailed there with the sailing yacht of Rockefeller in the northeast coast of the United States in the summer of 1972, which was the summer that I was gone 2 months. And, he was on an island, at a nice home on an island. We docked there and we stayed overnight. And so during the day, they were discussing together and I overheard them. And Rothschild had picked up that I understood that because David Rockefeller had always spoken French to me. And we'd already spent some weeks together, and he always spoke French to me, never realized that I also spoke or understood at least English, because he never assumed, he just got me from Europe. So he
Yeah.
didn't really, he was so proud that he spoke French. I guess he never thought to check. And Rothschild immediately could tell that I spoke English, that I understood the English. He was very psychic. So he invited me for a private conversation. And in that private conversation, he just addressed me in English. So then I knew that he understood. And I understand now, I figured all of this out in the healing process, is that because of the role they wanted to give me, I would have needed to be an active participant. I would have needed to give my will. And I could not be a coerced victim for what they wanted me to do. If I was going to be a star, which was going to be a singer actor in France, if I was going to have that role in the network with some other side roles in the, network related side roles with that, which always, all the roles are all about conglomerating power, like I was going to have a side role of attracting young artists because Rockefeller had noticed that I have a good eye for art. So I was going to find young artists and I'm going to be their mentor and draw them into the network. And then I was going to be sort of the intellectual, sexy star in France that very powerful men would be very drawn to. And then I would be involved with them and spying on them at the same time. And, I would be like a prostitute. They would pay millions because I was famous. That just drives up the price of the prostitution part. Rothschild had to give his permission because I was going to become a product of theirs.
Okay.
And so that's why I think he was ultimately going to get a percentage of whatever money was going to get made on me. And I'm assuming that there were going to be a lot of money made on that, and that most of that dirty money, they always say follow the money, but I don't think you could ever find it because that money all gets whitewashed by specialized bankers. All their money gets whitewashed, but I think most of their money gets made also internally from the trafficking, of course. That's where they make most of their money. And then everything else gets applied to their dark purposes, which is to keep, it's blind and it's stupid because it's conglomerating power all at the expense of others. And I think we're sort of at the end of it where we are all going like, obviously the politicians are not working for us.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter who you vote for. They're never working for us. It never works out well for us. Things should be getting better. People are becoming more peaceful. People are becoming more aware and wanting peace with one another, wanting to step out of division, more loving in general. So things should be getting better, not worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
But everything gets co-opted. Every issue that becomes a thing, if it gets a huge platform, usually it's because the network's already behind it.
Mhm.
And the only thing that stands in the way of this awakening is for us to see it, because if our resources are being tapped, that's because we are letting them.
I agree with you 1,000,000%.
We have to stop giving our power away.
I have to know really how did you come to the place you are today, from this dark world of trafficking to being who you are and accepting what you seem like more in peace, of very in peace, or I guess in some way in peace with what you went through. How can one get to this place? How can a person survive mentally also this kind of trauma? If someone is watching this video and is going through something like this, what would you tell them? How can they keep going?
Well, it's two questions really, because how I survived this, the people that I work with, there's something essentially about us that we never really wanted it.
Mhm.
So we were rebellious from the beginning, and that rebellion, I think, is the strength that connects us to the greater reality, which is beyond the duality. It's beyond our dark and it's beyond good and evil. The greater reality is the infinite love that is there for us all, and that is a greater reality than everything that happens here, all the light and dark, all the play on earth. So even though I was going through these horrible things, I often received spiritual help as a child. Subtle, it's not like, subtle in the sense that I would feel a presence, a loving presence, and it would help me in some way, or I would have an insight that helped. They're not, it's like I'm not going to be spared of the experience that I need to go through. And then I had a near-death experience at age 11, just that when I was basically rescued. And in that near-death experience, I was in that, I was sort of bathing in that love that is the reality, that is a great, more true than anything here on earth.
Can you describe a little bit what happened to you at that moment? How did you get to a near-death experience? What happened?
No, I don't want to describe that because that is really the subject of my book,
Okay.
you know,
Yeah,
Quest for Love. And that book really leads up to, you know, like the climax of that. The climax is that near-death experience and that experiencing that greater reality, and the circumstances leading up to it were so dramatic and really complex. But let's just say that the near-death experience meant that my physical body was dead, from wounds, from being tortured. And I had this experience to know what to strive for on one level, to feel that love, to know what to strive for, to feel also to know the difference between the highs that are encouraged in the network of drugs, of sexual ecstasy, of even ecstasy in these rituals, these feelings that they are engendering, to feel blissed out what they're seeking, because everybody seeks happiness, you know, so they're seeking this bliss, that to get the real thing, and to just notice, oh, it does come close, you know, what they're experiencing in a physical sense, it comes kind of close to this experience of ultimate bliss, feeling that divine love. But when you're in the divine love, you know that this is truth. Whereas when you're in the other state, you're you're in the darkest possible place where, you know, you're going to be lost for a really long time before you can, because getting to that place of true love, you know, if you follow truth, that's already like, if you want to know what's real, you're already following that spiritual path. If you know, if you, that love that is really more true than anything else here, that's what we're all seeking, you know, to get the place that we get to, that where you know you exist, you know you exist in bliss, and you know you're greater than the body, you're not going to die. You know, it was a near death experience because I did die, and then I wasn't dead at all. I was actually gloriously happy. So when you have a connection to some kind of spirit of, or let's say greater sense of self than just your ego, just your body, you get stronger, you know, you could say, it comes to the point, and it's come to the point several times in the network where I was going to die, and I said, fine, I don't care, I'm not going along. And then you immediately get the help of the divine, you know, when you can, you know, in these extreme moments in the network, I risked my life. I didn't care that they were going to kill me. He said, I'm not doing that. Okay, then okay, then immediately the divine comes to your support. And so when you have the divine, well, then you're, of course, much, that's where the real strength comes from anyway, because we never know what's going to happen in the physical world. Anything could happen any moment, and you know, we could die next minute. But it's how are we going to transition? And of course, those people in the network, they don't want to die because they never want to be faced with their own actions. So when you have the connection to spirit, that is what gives the rebelliousness of the survivors. And that's why I'm okay today. It's that divine love again and again and again, that I have to open if I open my heart to to love that is there, which is coming through a therapist or coming through people or coming through directly from the divine. If I open my heart to it, it also means that I have to feel all the pain from not having it and everything that happened in the network. I spent, you know, 30 years And I spent maybe 25 of those years really suffering tremendously to go through all of these very, very painful experiences that are just so harmful. Every time you get abused, it comes with a message that gets attached to your ego, and then you say, I am bad, dirty, evil. So to undo these lies, you have to get a perspective, you have to get a cleansing from somebody who's like, no, you're not. You're not bad. That was what they wanted you to feel. But then you shift your loyalty from those abusers that were like God when you were a child to the actual divinity, which can be anything that appeals to you. You know, for me, it was always truth. I want truth, and that's divinity.
Mhm.
And now it's more richer. It's richer than just truth, but it's still valid. But there's more that I can hang on to now. And that relationship, that personal relationship with the divine. See, I think that's what is really happening in the world is that this is all beginning to be seen, but it's existed for, 1,000 years at least, maybe probably longer. And it's always been hidden. And now it's beginning to be seen. And I think that we've come to a place where, we had organized religion. And in a way, this organized religion, there was just as much abuse there. The network, the Vatican, it's all the same. They're this part and parcel. There's no difference. This network is very much in every big place of power.
Wow. Okay. It's everywhere.
Yes. And I think what we're shifting now we're shifting from, in the organized religions, they said, you have to listen to the priest, you have to believe. And I think then people have said, okay, no more God. And I think what's happening now is that we're beginning to have this personal relationship with the divine, which is what truly empowers us. Because eventually, if we're healed, for me, that's spiritual. It's like we're going to be personally empowered from within, from knowing that we are children of God, all of us, and that from that knowing, there's nothing that can really scare us. And I think that we're moving away from that fearful time where we had the fearful authorities that we needed to follow like sheep, that now we're saying, now we're empowered ourselves. Healing empowers. Spirituality, if it's right, it should empower you, it make you feel better and happier. And I think we're in that shift now that people can have their personal relationship with God. If that's the case, then nobody needs an authority figure to tell them what to do. Then we can be our own police. We can take, if we listen to our voice of conscience, we can listen to that ourselves. Then we don't need authorities to enforce it.
Mhm. Anneke, you are amazing. I have no words. Really, really. So inspiring and so brave and strong. I'm speechless. Thank you so much. Thank you.
It's a
And
pleasure.
where can we find you? If are you open to talking to other survivors? Like, tell us a little bit about your work right now.
Yes, so mostly I work with survivors, so this is in private sessions. So I
Mhm.
do get a lot of messages. So if you go to my website, you have AnnekeLucas.com, and everything is there, what I do. I also am going to start doing a series of workshops again on the unconditional model, which is, I developed that, when I was working in the prisons, which not anymore, but when I was working in the prisons, I developed this model that as a provider, how do you keep space? How do you hold space for someone? And also, how do you hold space for someone who's been through this? So this unconditionality, you know, because a lot of providers, I had a lot of problems with providers. So I wanted to create, you know, to help providers to be more present and aware of power dynamics, and then working on yourself based on your own imbalance in power dynamics, where you give your power away and where you look down on other people, to use that as an entryway into your own psyche and find your own unresolved trauma, and then bring that love and presence to the parts that are, you know, suffering in I would say silence or isolation or whatever, just to go into the original events that made that created that power imbalance, which is from always from trauma. And so these healing, so I do these 10-week healing sessions, and so a lot of people like to join. It's anybody who's interested in the subject of either for survivors themselves, or people that want to are interested in the subject or want to work with survivors. We have that available for everybody. And so do these courses online for 10 weeks, and then there's a new one starting soon, and that's under the workshop tab of my website. And my book, if you know interested in the subject, and my book is I think a good resource. It goes into the detail, but also the spiritual. As I said, you know, the climax is that near-death experience, and it's all about lived experience with spirit, not blind belief. And yes, everything is on my website. So to get in touch with me, it's mostly private sessions or other kind of workshop situations is the best way to be in touch with me. Because I get so many emails, it's a little difficult to get private time, without it being some sort of like a sort of more stylized setting, like where we're going to have a session or something. But my assistant will respond to the emails, and I do get to see the emails, at least if there's messages or anything that you want to send.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much, Anneke. You're a beacon of light in such a dark and crazy world we live in. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. It was an honor to have you.
Oh, well, thank you for your tears. I feel very grateful that you're so moved. Thank you. Thank you for caring.
For sure.